In today's video, we're going to be talking about the hidden costs to parting out your WRX if you're selling your modified WRX or STI or just your modified vehicle. Here's my 2016 stock WRX at this point. It's being sold as stock. It does have a few cosmetic modifications, but we're really talking about the removal of some stock parts and performance parts. And let's talk about it for a second. And I'm going to talk to you about the experience that I've had and the experience a lot of people have when they actually remove a lot of the parts and one of the financial negatives it actually has. And it's not just this perfect world of I'm going to part my car out and make tons of money on all my parts, because things can go wrong. And let's talk about a few of those things. So some of the modifications you do to your car, like these little cosmetic stuff, aren't worth the risk and pain, especially if you did 3M double-sided tape. They do leave residue. It takes a lot of time to clean up. It's not really going to damage your paint unless you're not taking it off in the correct way. Make sure you use a heat gun, get it nice and pliable. Don't just rip it off when it's cold and static. Things like front lips where you actually have to drill into the bumper, those are things you just probably want to just leave on because you don't want to see the damaged front bumper. And then the big other things is it's easier if you're in a super warm climate, but things like I'm leaving on my carbon fiber duckbill spoiler because it is 3M tape. I can't get this thing off without risking damaging the car and the paint because there's so much 3M tape on there. It just wasn't worth the time. But the real negatives are with performance modifications. Now it is 5 degrees here, so we're actually going to jump inside and I'll talk to you about the real costs, and I'll show you, because I got to get the receipts so I can tell you guys exactly how much it cost with the things that actually happened to this 2016 WRX. So if you want the clickbait of the video, I ended up having to spend into the thousands to actually part this car out because things happened. Things went wrong, and I didn't have the perfect scenario to part the car out and take the performance parts off, so I did spend more than $1,000 actually getting this thing back to stock, which is a huge negative and basically a big portion of selling the parts off the car, so there is some value in actually selling it modified, but let's talk about it. Let's go inside first because I can't feel my hands anymore. It doesn't do it with the headlights anymore. No more sea lights. It's so sad. All right, so we've made it inside. It's absolutely freezing. You guys can see in the backdrop the full basement that I'm renovating in my house right now, hence why the garage is always so full, and I can't use the garage right now for the WRX. One of the reasons I was like, this is probably the right time to sell it. Needed a truck for a little bit of time, but that is beside the point. Hopefully you guys don't get distracted by the madness of hydronic heating pipe hanging. Oh, actually, that's hydronic heating pipe hanging and the wall that I was framing last week. But the reality is there are some hidden costs to parting out your WRX, and I wanted to kind of talk about that inside where I'm not like being absolutely bombarded by freezing weather. Again, I still can't feel my hands, which is a slight problem, but it is what it is. Basically what ended up happening is two things. One, I don't have a lift, so I wasn't able to take the J-pipe and the exhaust off. Well, I could have done the exhaust, but the J-pipe was a big no-no. I do live in New England, so I was expecting some corrosion, so I was like, what the heck? If I'm gonna take it, if I'm gonna have something taken off, I'm gonna take it somewhere. Ended up taking it to a local shop because I was like, I don't wanna pay someone at a super performance shop. I don't want to pay the same hourly rate. It's like the difference between like 110 bucks an hour versus 150, 160, 170 bucks an hour at a performance shop. Because if something goes wrong, like it's just labor, like rethreading, or if you break a stud or something. Well, the answer is one stud broke and 2 stripped on my turbo studs. That is like catastrophic failure essentially. That's the worst thing that can happen when you're taking your J-pipe off. And I was like, I'll have them do the cat back anyways because, they have it up on the lift and it's way easier to do. So I think they said with no problems, they were going to charge me like 350 bucks to get it all done, which is maybe a little bit expensive, but when you really think about it, after 3 years of being in New England and the rust and everything that happens and all the bolts swell and everything, probably more than 3 hours to actually take that. Maybe like an hour to take the exhaust off, maybe a little bit more. Definitely an inflated price, but for the, I guess the turnaround is if I were to try to do myself, it would be really dangerous, and it's a minimum of a day with the bolts and stuff. I mean, like you have to heat them up for quite a amount of time. You have to really work at them, air tools, and you break everything. It's kind of a delicate thing. But the short answer is they ended up breaking a stud, and 2 of them, they stripped 2 of them. So if you can believe it or not, it ended up costing me like $610 to get my turbo back exhaust removed and the stock one put back on. It pretty much couldn't have gone worse. I suppose it could have. It could have been all 4 or there could be further damage, but that's pretty bad. I wasn't expecting to spend 600 bucks. That's basically like Yeah, I think I got 520 bucks for the J-pipe itself. So basically gave away the J-pipe, which is kind of a bummer. And then the other thing was the dilemma between the electronic boost control solenoid and the intake. So the problem is well, a little bit about time, but I really couldn't get the electronic boost control solenoid off myself. Because of my driveway and the lack of garage right now, and my front lip, I can't get it up onto Rhino ramps, and you really have to have the car up in the air to be able to get into the electronic boost control solenoid. But the bigger problem was when I had Bren install the electronic boost control solenoid, because we just did it when I was getting the tune, he kept my stock solenoid. So I went and looked for a stock solenoid for some time, and I couldn't find one. I called Subaru, and he told me 7 months to get one, which is absolutely crazy because I guess it's not something that they keep in stock, which makes sense. So I was kind of forced. My hand was twisted. I had to go to Bren Tuning to get the electronic boost control solenoid swapped. And I was like, at that point, they might as well just do the intake anyways because they're already going to have to disconnect the intake. And it would have saved me a ton of time, and it's been super cold. So I took it in for them to do it, and he charged me $450 to take the intake and electronic boost control solenoid off, which sounds like a ton of money. It is a ton of money, but it is exactly what I was expecting because, again, Bren Tuning hourly rate is super high because there's such high demand for his work, and they work on a lot of cars. So I just had to do it. It was a cost that I had to have, which is a bummer, but the total ended up being I think it was like $1,070 total to have my car performance-wise kind of taken apart to part out. So not something I was thinking that was going to happen. To be honest with you, if it was warmer and I had the lift and I had my garage, probably could have saved a couple $100 there. I wouldn't have been able to get new turbo studs in, is my guess, on my own without a lift. So I would have been, that money is gone anyways. So I would have saved a little bit of money doing the electronic boost control solenoid if I could have a solenoid, and the intake's super easy to do. The reality is I'm, out of the total money that I could get for the part out, which is like maybe 70% of the parts value. So you sell them for 70% what you paid new for the most part, maybe 60%, more like 70%. Total for what I got from my car, minus $1,070. So if you don't have a lot of parts, like if it was just performance, you basically broke even. You might as well keep them on for the new owner. And that's why a lot of people say, oh, parts don't add money. For the most part, if you part out, you're going to make the most money. That's actually almost always true if you're a completely modified car. That was the truth for my car, even though I had to pay $1,070 because there were so many other things that I could have sold. And the access port and the J-pipe basically paid for the whole take apart. And then I could sell the boost control solenoid, the intake, the nameless catback, or the mid-pipe and the axle back separately, the head units, the wheels. I think that's basically everything I sold. The shift knob. I still ended up with more money even though I had to pay $1,070, but I guess, hidden cost, maybe not a hidden cost if you're expecting it, but something that I just wasn't expecting. I guess I wasn't really thinking about it, but I think most people don't think about it when they're thinking about the part out and how they're valuing their car and how they sell it. And, it's a weird time because everyone's like, your car's like listed for too much money, but that's just because the market's inflated and that's what market rate is. But the reality is when the market corrects or not, you have to understand that when you're parting out your car, it's not free. Things can go wrong. You can have issues where if it's cosmetic mods, you can have a damaged exterior that you either have to fix or have someone fix, or it lowers the adjustment of what your car is worth. Or the same thing with performance. If you're taking performance parts off, sometimes things happen depending on how long they've been on. If you live in an environment where you get rust and swelling around bolts, when I talk about swelling in the metal as it rusts, it just like swells a little bit, just enough that it can really like bond things together. So I actually cut a lot of the hardware just to separate the exhaust. The shop, just to save me money, because I was like, they called me, they were like, do you really want us to fiddle around to get all the hardware off? I was like, just drop it out as one if that's cheaper. Saved them a bunch of time, and I just went in there with a hacksaw and hacked all the hardware off, because the hardware really is the weak point when it comes to rust. The exhaust itself, no surface rust. You wouldn't even know that I was, it could be a car from Florida. Well, Florida's probably a bad example. It could be a car from an area that doesn't have any exposure to salt, ocean water, anything that would cause rust. No even surface rust, but all the hardware was just eaten up because it's not as high quality. That's not where the money goes. So thank you guys for watching the video. I know this wasn't the most interesting video and we're sitting inside because I'm absolutely freezing. At least you guys got to see where I'm at with the basement, because a lot of you guys do follow the channel and want to know where it's at. Whole basement is, well, I'm not completely done framing walls, but walls are being framed, so that's where we're at. Car is definitely going bye-bye. I'm going to see new cars every day, trying to find the right one for the channel, so stay tuned. There won't be a lapse in content. I'm filmed pretty far ahead. My guess is you're actually going to see this video pretty late. It's actually probably, by the time you're watching this, it's probably been 2 or 3 months since I've sold the WRX, if you can believe it, just because I'm trying to get ahead just in case finding a 2021 STI is harder than I think, because I've actually been looking for 3 months and I can't find one. So that's where life is right now. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys learned something today, and have a great day. Later, guys.